the biggest problem right now with the defense in Dallas.
No, Skip, and I keep hearing that the effort is not the problem. Okay, if effort is not the problem, you're giving up 37 points a game, so what is the problem? If it's not effort, what are you telling me, Skip? It's personnel.
Yep.
It's talent. So is that what you're telling me, Jerry? Is that what you're telling me, Mike McCarthy? Because, Skip, we saw this last year.
Yep.
We saw this team under this, and look, I know it's early in the season, but do I see a scenario, Skip, in which they'll look this bad and all of a sudden they turn into a top 10 defense? Skip, I don't see that coming. Now, there have been times that you say, okay, they're a player here. Maybe we get a turnover. Maybe they get something like that you're like, okay. They don't even turn you over. Well, if you don't turn, I'm looking at Skip. DeMarcus Lawrence has 0 sacks, 0 hits. In the last 13, 14 games, he has 0.5 sacks. He's supposed to be he gets paid premier money.
$21 million a year.
Oh, and Troy spoke about how he was disappointed.
Troy Aikman did.
Skip, all it comes down to, just watch the tape.
Troy Aikman said, you should be embarrassed to have put this on tape.
Skip,
right?
And he was talking about that game.
Right.
Hell, Troy, I'm talking about the whole season thus far. They should be embarrassed to put that on tape. Forget just that game.
I got it.
So I just want to know, Skip, if it's not the effort, it has to be personnel. At some point, the players have to, and coaches, every great coach that I've been around, any coach that's been worth anything, he said, guys, you got to take ownership of this. This is your team. You have to take ownership. That's what Mike would always tell us. Take ownership of it. Brian Billick would always tell us, take ownership of this. Y'all keep going out there, oh, this and all that. All that talking don't do nothing. All I know is that what I see is that your teams get the ball and they go down the field and score.
Yep.
And the opposing team's defense hold your offense. Y'all punt the ball to them and they go down the field and score. That's what I see. So all this Jerry Jones says we're gonna stay the course, and Mike McCarthy says, if Mike Nolan isn't the problem, and you're giving up 37 points a game, and you saw that run where a wide receiver bubbles 20 yards deep.
Yep.
And goes untouched for a 50-yard touchdown. If that's not effort, I don't know what is.
That's the epitome of no effort and no heart. You done?
And just imagine if you didn't have Alden Smith. If you didn't have Alden Smith, because Alden Smith is Rick Sharp. He's been the saving grace of your defense. Everybody else has underperformed.
Until Sunday, and I didn't see Alden. He looked running in sand to me on Sunday. Okay, you got it?
Yep.
Is Mike Nolan the problem? He's a little part of a much bigger problem.
Okay.
Again, just to keep him in perspective, the last time he was a defensive coordinator, 2012, 13, and 14 in Atlanta, they ranked 24th, 27th, and then 32nd in defense.
Right.
The first year was a good year for them because they went 13-3 with Matt Ryan. And yet they lost to San Francisco, remember, in the NFC Championship game at home.
Yep.
But they were still 24th in defense, then 27th, 32nd, and he got fired. He was the Chargers linebacker coach for a year. He was out of football for a year. Then the last 3 years, he was the Saints linebackers coach. Okay. How did he get the job? It's cronyism because he gave Mike McCarthy his first shot at being a coordinator way back in 2005 in San Francisco. And Mike Nolan was the head coach for the 49ers for 4 years, 3.5 years, really. I knew his father very well because he was an assistant on Tom Landry's staff, the great Dick Nolan, who was the head coach of the 49ers once upon a time. Cronyism got him the job. Is he a dynamic leader and motivator? No, he's not. So now we get to the crux of the problem. And I'm going to respond to something that I was asked last night by our man Neil Scarborough, who you know very well.
Yes.
He's our executive editor here at FS1.
Yep.
He's been around almost as long as I have. He knows all and sees all. And he asked me a good question last night. He said, it seems like the Cowboys are always so spoiled in Dallas. Being a Cowboy in Dallas, it's like the ultimate pro football job to have.
Yeah.
You know, it's America's team.
Yes.
But they don't play with any urgency during much of the Jerry era. Well, I agree with that. So let me explain what has happened. I covered 2 coaches who inspired fear in the locker room in ways I've never seen any other coach inspire fear. I wrote books about the Tom Landry era and the Jimmy Johnson era. Tom Landry, even though I called him God's coach because he worked for the Billy Graham Crusade in the offseason, He was a godlike figure during the football season. He was, as he said, all business. And it was the big business of pro football. And he was seen by his players as cold-blooded, aloof, chilling, distant, not loving at all. They were scared to death of the film sessions. The early Cowboys, 60s, they all wrote about and talked about how they had to take drugs to go into the film session to anesthetize themselves against the onslaught of criticism that they were going to get as a group in front of everybody. Okay? So they played in fear of Tom Landry, and they played hard for him because they feared
the wrath.
That they might be gone the next day.
Absolutely.
Here came, in the wake of Tom Landry, Jimmy Johnson, the biggest force field of a football coach I have ever encountered. He was a tornado, a human tornado. I loved watching him operate because the players were scared to death of a guy they thought was a crazy you-know-what. What might that crazy you-know-what do? In their first Super Bowl run, in the final regular season game, they were way ahead of Mike Ditka's Chicago Bears at home, and a backup running back named Kervin Richards fumbled in the fourth quarter, and the next day Jimmy cut him. So they went without a backup running back going into the playoff run in which they won the Super Bowl, okay? That was Jimmy Johnson. I couldn't sum him up better than that.
Right.
Scared to death of him.
Well, he cut the guy, what was it, John Roper that fell asleep in the meeting?
Yep.
And he cut him. And he just said, well, what if that was Troy? He said, I woke him up.
Okay. So they played in fear of him, and they played hard for him.
Yes.
Barry Switzer obviously took Jimmy and Jerry's talent that they had assembled, and it was a great football team that kind of won in spite of itself the second year with Barry Switzer. But it was he was the good cop to Jimmy's bad cop.
Correct.
And they loved Barry Switzer, especially the black players would have run through walls for Barry Switzer, and they wanted to win one for him.
Right.
So that was a different dynamic that year.
Okay.
But it didn't last very long. And then since then, it's been all vanilla. It's all milquetoast. It's all a long line of Chan Galeys and Dave Campos and you know the rest, and all the way up to Jason Garrett.
Because but Skip, you mentioned Tom Landry. You mentioned Jimmy Johnson. The buck stopped with them. You wasn't going upstairs and talking to the owner.
I agree. No, you're right.
You got to have that.
Yep. So what has this owner been known for? He wants star power. He wants box office, and he seems to prioritize entertaining even above winning.
Right.
So what does he do with the stars? He pays and often overpays. And right now you can make a case they got a bunch of really overpaid stars, except for the quarterback who is on the franchise tag, and you've made the case he deserves more money. That's still debatable. But that's the first time Jerry's ever drawn a line in the sand with any star and said, I'm not going to overpay my quarterback and give him $40+ million. Right now, they could be 0-4.
Correct.
Is there any sense of urgency inspired by Mike McCarthy? None at all.
No.
Does Mike Nolan, does he inspire the locker room? Are they afraid that heads might roll tomorrow? There's none of that. Jerry defended Mike Nolan yesterday, gave him a vote of confidence, saying nobody knows football any more than Mike Nolan. Well, I don't doubt that, but in that matters what?
Right.
What does that mean? It means nothing.
There's a lot of quarterbacks that know football. They can't play,
Correct.
but they know it.
Right. So, again, Dallas is the ultimate winner's town. It is, if you're a Cowboy in Dallas, you're a made man.
You are.
Everybody wants to be your best friend.
It's like a Yankee in New York.
It is. It might even be beyond that.
Because it's smart. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, it's America's team. It's like Hollywood in Dallas.
Yeah.
And you wear that metallic blue and you can strut around town. It often gets you in trouble because anybody's willing to give you anything to be able to befriend a Dallas Cowboy.
Right.
And in the end, there's no fear of losing your job. It's all fat cat syndrome. I got it made. Jerry paid me $21 million to be a Dallas Cowboy. So they don't play with any urgency, especially on the defensive side of the ball.
Skip, but if you look at it, look how Jerry and Steven has constructed this team. It's offensively star heavy. You got Zeke, Dak, Amari, CD.
Sells. It sells.
So you see the way he constructed his team. And even though he needed, Skip, offense wasn't their problem last year. He goes into the draft, he's like, Skip, it's like you got 10 cars. Even though it's a nice car, you don't need another car.
Yeah, I can't condemn him for taking CeeDee Lamb just because he's so good. They had him 6th on their board, and they're sitting at 17 saying,
Skip, you need defense.
I got it. but you can also strengthen your strength and win with offense. But you can't turn the ball over, and you can't fall behind 29-10 at halftime.
Well, Skip, you need when you're struggling offensively. Now, when I played with Denver, we didn't have the Ravens defense, but we had a defense that if we struggled a possession or two, when we got back on the field, it wasn't 10-0, it wasn't 14-0. They could keep us afloat until we got it going. Now, obviously, we struggled the whole game, and the Ravens defense, Skip, you weren't getting anything. But to your point you said earlier, the fear. I remember one game we lost. I was in Denver my rookie year, and we had lost like 4 or 5 games in a row. Dan said, you know what? I'm not feeding you sorry you-know-whats. Go get your own lunch.
Yep.
He come into the meeting special team.
He was a chip off Tom Landry.
He was Tom Landry's offensive coordinator.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Skip, he would come in for special teams. He would come in there, we playing Mel Gray, or we playing this great returner, Eric Metcalf. And he come in there, he stopped the film. He said, there are guys walking the street that would give their left arm to be in this room.
That's true.
If somebody runs this ball back, somebody's going to have to pay for that. Now, he'd walk out. He ain't watching it. He say what he said, walk out. I'm looking at the other guys, bro. I ain't going home. So we need to tighten this thing down. If we need to study extras, get keys and tendencies, we need to make it happen.
Yep.
That was a fear. You better not. Ain't nobody fearing. What? Skip, I go with Mike McCarthy and go talk to Jerry. That's what I will do if I'm on the defense. That's what they can do. Once you open that door, Skip, and the players feel that I have a secret passage to get to the owners that the coach doesn't know about, they'll do it.
I got it. And it's always Granddaddy Jerry. That's what it is, because they don't fear him. They love him, and they know he loves them to a fault.
That's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for watching. You can subscribe here to get the latest from the show, and be sure to check out more of the best clips from Undisputed, or go watch a few other segments from our other shows on FS1.